There comes a point in life when we realize we're not the same anymore. It's not something that happens suddenly, like a snap, but a silent, almost imperceptible transformation that begins with small choices. It's when you realize you no longer accept everything just to keep the peace, that you no longer blame yourself for not meeting others' expectations, and that the burden of pleasing the whole world begins to seem absurd. Saying no ceases to be a gesture of coldness, but of respect. A no that comes loaded with self-love and, paradoxically, with love for the other as well. Because it is when you choose yourself that you learn the value of choosing truthfully. This is the point where many get confused. They think that saying no is about pushing people away, when in fact it's the only way to remain whole. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires courage, and this courage often manifests itself in the exact instant the word no forms on our lips, firm, serene, and without anger. Some people spend years trying to understand why it's so difficult to say no, why their heart races when they need to displease someone, why the fear of disappointing seems greater than the fear of losing themselves. The answer, at its core, is simple and brutal. We were taught from a young age that love is synonymous with sacrifice. That goodness is about yielding, understanding, and giving up. But this kind of kindness hurts because it suffocates. And Jung warned us, everything we repress in the name of harmony returns later, distorted, demanding to be heard. The swallowed no transforms into resentment. The forced yes becomes exhaustion. And so, little by little, the love that should unite us becomes an invisible prison. When you say no consciously, you are freeing not only yourself but also the other person. You are saying, I respect you enough not to lie to you. It is at this moment that love matures. But no one reaches that point without experiencing discomfort. Saying no to someone we love is one of the most challenging experiences for the soul. It's a direct confrontation between the desire to maintain the bond and the need to preserve one's own boundaries. The first time you truly say no, you feel guilty. The second time you hesitate. The third time you begin to understand that it's not rejection, it's clarity. And over time you realize that whoever truly loves you will stay there, because genuine love doesn't feed on submission, but on truth. Jung saw no as a symbol of integration, the moment when the ego and the self that wants to please and the self that wants to be free, finally face each other and make peace. It's a silent rite of passage, almost spiritual. Emotional maturity doesn't come when you achieve stability or success, but when you learn to say no without fear of losing the other person's love. It's when you understand that it's not your responsibility to carry the world on your shoulders, that there's no virtue in self-annihilation, and that no love is true if it depends on your total surrender. There is wisdom in refusing. There is compassion in setting a limit. And there is beauty in accepting that not everything can be shared, that some choices need to be made alone, because ultimately it is this conscious solitude that makes us whole. Jung called this inner reconciliation, the moment when what you feel, think, and do finally align. Saying no is the beginning of healing many invisible wounds. It's an act of courage disguised as simplicity, a gesture that separates those still seeking approval from those who have already found peace. But only those who have given too much of themselves understand its power. Those who have experienced the exhaustion of trying to be everyone's foundation and realize that, in the end, no one can be saved if they don't first learn to save themselves. And perhaps that's why Jung stated that maturity is not an accumulation of certainties, but a purification, a process of unlearning what no longer serves. No is one of these purifications. It clears the space, reorganizes the soul, and restores the lightness of living authentically. Before we continue, I want to extend a sincere invitation. If, in any way, these words are making you reflect, If at any point in your journey you felt the weight of saying yes when you wanted to scream no, then this channel is for you. Here, we don't just talk about theory, but about the soul. Subscribe and share your experience in the comments. Tell us about a time when you had to choose yourself, even if it hurt. These stories strengthen other people who may now be going through the same thing. The truth is, nobody teaches us how to choose ourselves. From a young age, we are molded to be good, kind, and helpful. We learn that saying yes opens doors, that no closes hearts. But there comes a time when the body starts to warn us of what the soul already knew. It's over. It's exhausting to live to please others. It's exhausting to swallow discomfort and smile out of obligation. It's exhausting to put yourself last, waiting for someone to notice and rescue you. And Jung spoke precisely about this, about the shadow that is born when the true self is suffocated in the name of acceptance. Because the price of approval is often one's own identity. And the more you try to be what others expect, the further you get from who you really are. Saying no, then, is like opening a window after years in a closed room. The air comes in, and with it comes a shock, but also a freedom you didn't know existed. But freedom is also frightening, because it demands responsibility. When you start living according to your truth, you will inevitably disappoint someone. And that hurts. You will lose some people. You will be misunderstood. You will be called cold, distant. But with time, you will understand that this is part of the process. Mature love is not the kind that demands the other person bend over backward, but the kind that respects space and individuality. A no said with love is a form of honesty. It may hurt for a moment, but it prevents deeper wounds later. How many relationships have broken down because one of the two never had the courage to say enough? How many friendships have ended because someone gave in too much until they were completely lost? That's why no is an act of love, because it preserves what is still true, even if it hurts at first. Jung believed that maturity begins when you stop running from conflict, internal conflict primarily, when you look at yourself and realize there are two voices constantly vying within you, one that wants to please and another that wants to be free. And true adulthood is about learning to reconcile these two. The no is the meeting point between them. It's the moment when you choose inner peace instead of external approval. And curiously, it's at this moment that solitude changes form. It ceases to be empty and becomes fertile. You become self-sufficient. You begin to realize that silence, once feared, is a place of reunion. That being alone is sometimes the only way to become whole again in the presence of another. The curious thing is that the more you learn to say no, the more you realize how much people test you. They measure you by the boundaries you set. And that's where respect begins, because no doesn't push away those who truly love you, it just filters. It pushes away those who only approached you for what you offered, not for who you were. And when that happens, something inside you changes. The need to justify yourself disappears. You stop explaining yourself and simply start living. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you've learned that love and submission are different things. Ultimately, all Jung meant about maturing was this. Growing up isn't about hardening. It's about discernment. It's about understanding what fits and what no longer fits in your soul. No is the instrument of this discernment. It's not a barrier. It's a boundary, a silent line that protects your peace and delimits how far the other person can go without hurting you. And when this awareness arrives, life changes. Relationships become more sincere, bonds lighter, and love, finally, more real. There's a profound change that happens when you learn to say no calmly. At first, it seems like a small, almost banal gesture, but it opens a completely new path within you. It's as if, for the first time, you're breathing fresh air after years of living under the weight of others' expectations. Jung said that individuation, this process of becoming who you truly are, begins precisely when you realize you no longer need to mold yourself to be loved. And this understanding doesn't come from a book, it comes from pain. From that silent pain of someone who always said yes to avoid losing someone and ended up getting lost along the way. There's a point where the body, mind, and heart collapse emotionally. That's where no is born, not as a scream, but as a liberation. I find it curious how the word no has such a bad reputation. From childhood, we are trained to avoid saying no. Saying no is seen as being stubborn, selfish, difficult. We grow up believing that love is made of endless concessions, and that good love is that which never says no. But when you live trying to please everyone, you end up becoming a stranger in your own life. And the most tragic thing is that often nobody notices. On the outside, everything seems fine. You smile, you help, you welcome. Inside, there's an inexplicable weariness. Jung called this state unconscious life, when you act on autopilot guided by external demands, until one day something within you awakens and you understand that living like this is dying little by little. At that moment, no becomes your salvation. Emotional maturity is, to a large extent, a process of detachment. Detachment from the need to be understood, to be validated, to be accepted. It's painful because we've been taught that love requires immediate reciprocity, that to love is to be reciprocated. But Jung taught that true love is born from individuation, from the encounter between two whole beings, not two halves trying to complete each other. And no, in this context, is an act of integrity. It's when you look at the other person and say, I love you, but I can't betray myself because of it. This is the most mature form of love that exists, because there is no imposition, there is respect, there is no fear, there is awareness. But there's a subtle detail that few realize. Saying no is also an invitation for the other person to truly know you. When you set a limit, you're showing who you are. And those who remain by your side after that stay by choice, not out of convenience. Jung saw no as a revelation of the self, the center of the psyche, the place where authenticity resides. No is a reflection of what you've already understood about yourself. And when it's said calmly, without guilt, the world around you begins to reorganize itself. People distance themselves, others come closer, and you begin to see with almost painful clarity who truly sees you. That's when love matures, when it's chosen consciously, not out of neediness. Many people confuse peace with the absence of conflict, but true peace requires confrontation. Confrontation with your own limitations, with unfulfilled desires, with the guilt you carry. And no is the tool for this confrontation. It forces you to take a stand. It forces you to listen to yourself. How many times have you said yes just to avoid an argument? How many times have you negated yourself to maintain harmony? Each of those times was a small betrayal of yourself. Jung said that the unconscious demands payment for every silent renunciation, and it demands it dearly. It transforms what you have repressed into symptoms, into anguish, into emptiness. That's why, when you finally learn to say no, something within you heals. Because no is the antidote to repression. It is the affirmation of your right to exist in your own way. And it's curious how the world reacts when you start to change. Some distance themselves, others try to make you revert to your old ways. They'll call you different, cold, even selfish. But what they don't understand is that healthy selfishness is the foundation of true love. Because those who don't know how to love themselves don't know how to love anyone. No is the shield of those who are tired of begging for affection. It's the voice of those who have learned that love doesn't have to come at the expense of oneself. Jung stated that the greatest proof of maturity is when you stop fighting against the flow of life and begin to follow the natural rhythm of your soul. And sometimes following that rhythm means saying no to everything that doesn't resonate with who you are. The journey of learning to say no is also a journey of rediscovering authenticity. At first, there's fear. You fear disappointing. You fear losing connections. But little by little, you discover something liberating. Those who distance themselves from your no never stayed for your yes. And this awareness changes everything. Suddenly, you begin to value solitude, pauses, silence. You start saying no to what distracts you and yes to what nourishes you. You begin to choose more calmly, to respond more consciously, to act with more truth. And that's when maturity ceases to be theory and becomes daily practice. Jung also said that the individuation process never ends. It's a path without a finish line. With each no, you learn to say, you discover a new, deeper yes, more aligned with your purpose. Saying no to a job that destroys you can be saying yes to your health. Saying no to a relationship that limits you can be saying yes to your freedom. Saying no to fear can be saying yes to your soul. Maturation is this dance between what you reject and what you accept. And the more conscious it becomes, the lighter the step. There's something almost spiritual in this learning process. Saying no is, at its core, recognizing your own limitations, and that's an act of humility. It's accepting that you can't be everywhere, please everyone, endure everything. It's reconciling with the fact that being human means being finite. And when you accept this finitude, love takes on another dimension. It ceases to be possession and becomes presence. You no longer need to prove what you feel, because what you feel is true. And true love never demands that you deny yourself in order to exist. Over time, you realize that no is also a mirror. It shows how much you've evolved. A no said in anger comes from pain. A no said in fear comes from insecurity. But a no said peacefully comes from maturity. It's the point where you no longer need to defend yourself because you are already whole. And it's beautiful to see when someone reaches that place, when their voice becomes calm, their gaze becomes firm, and decisions cease to be reactions and become choices. Jung said that the mature individual is not the one who lives without conflict, but the one who has learned to dance with their own shadows. And no is the most difficult step in that dance. Perhaps the greatest challenge is understanding that no is not the end, but the beginning. It opens space for the new, it clears the ground, it separates the essential from what merely occupies space. And when you understand this, you begin to appreciate the no's you received as well, because they shaped you, protected you, guided you. There is wisdom in what didn't happen, in what was denied, in what didn't fit. Every no that life gave you pushed you closer to who you are today. Jung would say that destiny manifests itself in refusals as much as in opportunities, and that maturing is learning to trust in that. Ultimately, every genuine no is an act of love, self-love, love for others, love for the truth. And that's what makes this gesture so powerful. Because when you learn to say no with a peaceful heart, you discover that love isn't measured by how much you endure, but by how much you respect yourself. No is the beginning of freedom, and freedom is the soil where true love flourishes. There comes a point in life when the word no stops sounding like a defense mechanism and becomes synonymous with balance. It's when you no longer need to justify every limit, nor apologize for choosing your own peace. In the beginning, there's guilt, of course. There's always guilt when you change the role the world has given you. But then comes something greater, the serenity of realizing that the love that compels you to betray yourself was never love. It was dependence. Jung said that maturing is about overcoming the fear of disappointing. It's about accepting the solitude necessary to become whole. And that's what no does. It matures the heart, because whoever learns to say no also learns to love in a purer way, without shackles, without control, without the desperation to be accepted. No isn't a barrier, it's a mirror. It shows you how much you can endure, what hurts you, what makes you feel good, and what no longer fits. And when you start listening to this mirror, something inside you aligns. Suddenly, life becomes clearer. The noise diminishes. You begin to say yes only to what makes you vibrate and no to what steals your peace. It seems simple, but it's one of the most profound transformations someone can experience, because it demands courage, it demands presence, it demands being awake in a world that tries to convince you all the time that you need to fit in. Saying no is choosing to be whole, even when it costs you approval, and it is in this choice that maturity is born. Maturity isn't about ceasing to feel. It's about feeling in a different way. It's knowing that love doesn't need to consume you to be true. It's understanding that the absence of conflict isn't synonymous with harmony, and that sometimes the true gesture of love is putting an end to something before the other person gets lost within you. Jung said that the soul cannot endure long betrayals, that everything we repress in the name of apparent peace returns sooner or later, demanding repair. And no is that repair. It's the moment when you decide not to continue hurting yourself to maintain what is no longer reciprocal. There is nobility in that. There is faith in that. Because no is a way of saying, I believe that love can exist without me having to disappear. Those who learn to say no begin to see the world with different eyes. They come to understand that time is too short to live trying to please others, that it's not worth insisting on doors that only open if you diminish yourself, that the peace you feel when you respect yourself is worth more than any momentary acceptance. And curiously, the more you choose yourself, the more others respect you. People notice when you live from truth. They may distance themselves at first, but those who stay begin to approach you in a different way, not out of self-interest, but out of soul affinity. That's how true bonds are born, not from need, but from freedom. Mature love is that which accepts the other's no without falling apart, because it understands that love is not possession, it's presence. Jung said that loving someone is allowing them to be who they are, even if it means they don't choose you all the time. When you reach that point, something within you is freed. Jealousy, dependence, the fear of being forgotten all lose their power, because love ceases to be a search and becomes a sharing. You love not to be completed, but because you are overflowing. And those who overflow don't beg for space, they simply offer what they are. But it's necessary to acknowledge this path hurts. Saying no to what harms you, even when it's comfortable. Saying no to those you love when you realize that it no longer sustains you. Saying no to old versions of yourself that you still insist on carrying. Each no is a goodbye, and every goodbye is painful. But it is this pain that purifies you. Jung called this the individuation process, the blossoming of the authentic self, the one that doesn't need applause to exist. And the curious thing is that the more you align yourself with yourself, the more you realize that what seemed like loss was liberation, that the no that broke your heart was the same one that saved your soul. That's why saying no is also an act of faith. Faith that you don't need to control how things end to be on the right path. Faith that the love that is yours will remain, and what isn't will dissolve without you having to beg. Faith that there is purpose even in what falls apart. Jung believed that the unconscious works in our favor even when we don't understand the reason for the ruptures. Sometimes no is just the way life finds to reposition you, to move you away from what makes you sick and closer to what makes you grow. Over time, you begin to appreciate the no's you received, those doors that closed, those people who left, those plans that failed. All of that was the universe's way of telling you that you didn't need to be there, that something more aligned with your true self awaited you ahead. Jung said that nothing happens by chance, that everything that happens to you is a message from the psyche trying to guide you back to your essence. And perhaps no is the clearest message of all, a reminder that your soul knows the way, even when your mind insists on holding you back. To mature is to stop resisting the flow of life. It's understanding that it's impossible to please everyone or to live without losses, that the pursuit of approval is a prison disguised as virtue, and that true love doesn't require you to deny yourself in order to exist. No is the antidote to guilt, submission, and blind surrender. It's the boundary that protects your peace and keeps you in touch with what is sacred within you. Because true love, for yourself and for others, is born when there is space, and no is what creates that space. If you observe carefully, you will see that the most serene people you know are not those who say yes all the time. They are those who have learned to say no without anger, without guilt, without explanation. They don't carry the weight of approval because they understand that love doesn't need to be proven. They are not afraid of solitude because they have discovered that their own company can be a refuge. They don't live in search of applause because they have found value in simply existing. And it is this state of serenity that Jung called integration, when you are no longer a fragment, but a unity. Of course, society tries to convince us otherwise. It glorifies yes, sacrifice, limitless giving. It makes us believe that loving means always being available, always willing, always present. But the truth is that this kind of love is exhausting. It takes its toll. And no is the only remedy capable of restoring balance. Saying no doesn't make you less generous. It makes you more genuine. And true generosity is born from abundance, not scarcity. You can only give what you have. If you are empty, all you offer is half, and loving halfway is the origin of almost all emotional pain that exists. So if there's one thing Jung teaches us about maturity, it's that it happens in the silence of well-spoken no's, in the courage to disappoint someone so as not to abandon yourself, in the moment you understand that love and truth are inseparable, that a lying yes destroys much more than a sincere no, that true love endures limits because it knows that limits are what keep the relationship healthy. And in the end, that's what separates immaturity from wisdom. The immature person wants to please, the wise person wants to be true. And when you reach that level of awareness, something changes forever. You begin to choose calm over haste, depth over quantity, presence over appearance. You begin to prefer the true few to the false many, and life, once turbulent, begins to align with your rhythm. Not because it became easier, but because you stopped fighting against what is. Learning to say no is also learning to trust, trusting that what is yours remains, that what leaves needed to leave, that what remained because it makes sense. And that, more than anything, is freedom. Jung said that the soul knows what it needs long before the mind understands. Therefore, whenever something inside you cries out for boundaries, listen. It may be your most important no there, the one that will change the course of your life. It could be a no to a routine that makes you sick, to a relationship that consumes you, to a pattern that imprisons you. And by saying this no, you are not breaking with the world. You are simply returning to yourself. Because the true spiritual path is not the one that distances you from people, it is the one that brings you closer to your essence. And no is the first step on that journey. If you've made it this far, take a deep breath and allow yourself to feel. Perhaps there's someone or something waiting for your no for a long time. Something that drains you, steals your energy, prevents you from growing, and maybe today is the day to release it, because saying no is an act of love, not only for yourself, but for everything that can still flourish from this free space that is born when you choose the truth. There is no greater healing than that.